Hello and welcome to Talk Gnosis, the web's premier talk show about Gnosticism, the esoteric, alchemy, Hermeticism, the Rosicrucians, mysterious texts, Neoplatonism, and anything else we feel like talking about. I'm
Especially
Deacon Jonathan.
synchronicity.
Oh yeah, synchronicity. Yeah, we are actually way overdue for a Jung show. Gonna try to book it. If you're a Jung expert and you're out there, hit me up. The email's down in the show notes. I'm Deacon Jonathan Stewart. I'm live
Sorry about
from
that.
Montreal. And joining me, of course, is Bishop Lady Peterson, live from Chicago. Hello, Bishop.
Hello. The reason I mentioned synchronicity is I had just been looking at some information about Dr. Chaitow's book, which we're going to be talking about today, like the day before you told me that she was going to be on the show.
Yes, and that's
so
like the third
he
time
sends it
that's
over to me.
happened.
Yeah, and this has been an ongoing thing. We've actually been bringing up synchronicity on the shows recently in the last few guests, and then this happened, and I said, okay, well, I'm just going to roll with it.
Exactly. It's meant to be the cosmos is telling us to do this show, share this knowledge with you, and encouraging everybody to watch the show to go out and buy Dr. Sasha Chaitow's book, which, of course, brings us to our guest, Dr. Sasha Chaitow, live from Greece. Hello, Dr. Chaitow.
Very good evening from Corfu, Greece. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah, synchronicity is a big deal for me as well, so I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I wear a number of hats. I think this evening I'm invited as an author, but I am also, I'm a researcher into the history of Western esotericism, among other things, and as well as the history of science more recently, as well as an artist and educator in various other sundries.
We've actually, sorry. We've been meaning to have you on the show for a very long time, and we hope that this is not going to be your only appearance. And we thank you because it's the middle of the night where you are. Now, before we get into the really good stuff, I have to do the top of the show commercial, because if I leave it to the end of the show, you're all going to turn off the show and run out and buy Sasha's book. So we can't have that. But I do have to put in a plug for our, we can have you buying the book. Go ahead and do that. But we can't have you missing the commercial, which is, please, if you can, support us on patreon.com/Gnostic. We are volunteers. We do need money to do the show. We hire the world's best digital studio, 99 perspectives, and we do need your financial support to keep doing the show. The show is brought to you by viewers like you. You can donate for as little as $1 per piece of media per month. You can also cap that, because sometimes we do more media, so you can put in the top amount that you want to put in. If you don't want to have a recurring charge, you can also visit paypal.me/Gnostic. You can do a one-time donation there. I know these are hard times, and donating as little as $1 may not be possible for you, but if you like what we're doing and you want to support us in other ways, subscribe to our YouTube, subscribe to us on podcatchers, share the show on social media, rate and review it, send it to a friend via email. So that's the plug. Enough of the sizzle, on to the steak. Dr. Chaitow, your book is called
Atalanta Unveiled.
Perfect. And before we get right into it, we got to start at the very beginning. Who was Count Michael Mayer?
So, the book focuses on a multimedia emblem book from the 17th century by Count Michael Mayer, who was the epitome of a Renaissance man. He was royal physician to King Rudolph of Prague within the very alchemy-friendly court of the day. He was a diplomat, he was an author, and he was, of course, an alchemist. And he was an early Rosicrucian apologist straight after the time of the appearance of the Rosicrucian manifestos. And all of this, of course, is happening within the context of religious conflicts and turbulence within Europe. So this is a man who has literally stumbled across ancient philosophy and alchemical literature in the library of a patient of his. And through that discovery, he, and through his medical knowledge, such as it was, he's trying to make sense of the cosmos, and he essentially tries to use Pythagorean number theory in order to kind of structure and give shape to and give form to and make sense of all the knowledge that he had accumulated. And again, all of this within the context of what was essentially the the Rosicrucian promise that a new age was dawning, and this would be a time when peace would eventually reign, and that a time when humanity would be able to finally take a step closer to the divine. So in a nutshell, that's who he was.
Okay, I know this is a complex question, complex answers, lots of definitions, but what is alchemy, and how did Mayer understand alchemy?
Well, you know, you ask what is alchemy, ask 10 people, you'll get 10 different answers, because it's, yeah, even scholars talk about alchemies rather than alchemy. It's that difficult. Alchemy, oh, it's a stream of it's many streams of different things feeding into something we try to call a tradition, but it's not. It is more complex than that. It's proto-chemistry. It begins with metallurgical practices right back at the dawn of recorded history. It's early medicine. It's the practice of trying to refine both metals, but also nature. In parallel and at the same time, you can't really differentiate one from the other. It's a system for spiritual growth and spiritual refinement, self-refinement, really. Jung, unfortunately, Jung popularized alchemy again, and many people do first come to alchemy via Jung. I did, you know, I'll freely admit that. But the thing is that one of the disservices that Jung did to alchemy was he detached the practical from the spiritual, and alchemy is essentially built out of a theoretical base, the physical, the actually hands-on lab alchemy, and the spiritual dimension. And without all three, it's not alchemy. To be honest, it's something inspired by or based on or extracted from, or call it what you want, but it's not actually alchemy. And the reason was, the idea was that we are so connected as humanity, we are so connected to nature, and we ourselves are the bridge between the physical and the spiritual, if you like, plane, that we have to participate in the whole process, body and soul, quite literally. Otherwise, we're not doing it. So, and that is Mayer's understanding as well, put in very simple terms. It's had a bad rap. We usually get the kind of popularized version of gold makers and puffers and people trying to get rich quick by turning lead into gold. Yeah, there were people like that. There were people like that in Mayer's day. There've always been people like that. There always will be. But when we're talking about alchemy as I don't like to call it an esoteric system, because it wasn't just esoteric. It was a healing practice, and it was the practice of truly communing with nature in all its dimensions and at all its levels, essentially.
What was the Atalanta Fugiens? Don't know if I said that right, which is, of course, okay. And what your book, Atalanta Unveiled, is about. And like, what is this text? Why did he create it?
Okay, so the Atalanta Fugiens is a book of emblems, and it consists of 50 copperplate emblems with exquisitely detailed alchemical symbolism. And these are accompanied by a short motto, or you could call it a title in a way, in Latin, then a short legend, which is it's like a verse. It's 6 or 7 lines, And then each of these emblems and legends are also accompanied by, each one has a piece of music that's been written for it or attached to it, which is meant to be played and sung at the same time as studying both image and text. And all of that is wrapped in a longer commentary in which Maya actually goes into many of the elements that he's drawn together all the way back from ancient philosophy to more current to his time, either alchemical or other theories and philosophies, to try to help the reader to unlock the actual meaning. So the reader was essentially expected to contemplate the image, listen and sing to the music, study the legend, which is actually a riddle. They all read like riddles, and then study the commentary until they've unlocked the meaning. And this is one of 4. Well, basically, it's the Atalanta and one other, the Arcana Arcanissima, which are like full, really rich emblem books. And then there are 2 other ones, 2 earlier ones he did, which are similar. But each of these were meant, it seems, to unfold for the reader who could unlock the riddles, because you have to be able to unlock them. It's not straightforward at all. Meaning is not straightforward. That was meant to lead you through the alchemical process, reveal the alchemical steps, if you like, and stages, which, if followed, because you obviously have to get into the lab for that, would eventually lead to this process of gradual ascension and refinement.
Now, most people, they think of multimedia as a new thing, and I'm sure a lot of people at home, if they're not familiar with this text, is like, wow, this sounds quite complex. Why did he make it a multimedia experience?
Okay, so you've got to imagine that in the Renaissance, everything, and I mean, there's I don't think we have the time on the show to go into too much detail, but there was this huge emphasis on the image and on images with meaning. So when you look at Renaissance art, for example, like well-known Renaissance art, so Botticelli's work, Michelangelo, so on, there's riddles within riddles, there's meanings within meanings, there's little references to this myth here and that myth there. And it was a sign of education and a social standing if you could actually, the more complex the image, if you could unpack that, that was actually a sign of social standing and a good education. And there's one painting by this is not related to Maya, but it is related to the framework in which he was working, by Bronzini, which is this incredible allegory, and it's really, really complex. It was gifted to a king of the day, and it was meant as a huge compliment because it was so complex that it's as if the person giving the gift was saying that he acknowledged the king's wisdom and depth of knowledge, that he knew he would be able to decipher it. So in the Renaissance, you look at Renaissance architecture, there's images everywhere, there's reliefs, there's little faces, there's little symbols, there's this, none of that's decorative, all of it's meaningful. You walk around the city of Rome and you see this, especially Renaissance buildings, there's images everywhere. This was deliberate. And it was part of this huge kind of drive towards humanist philosophy, in which, as you would walk through the streets, you'd be bombarded with little messages, little moral teachings, little suggestions, things to contemplate on your way home kind of thing. So, now we're bombarded with advertisements, then you'd be bombarded with that kind of thing. So back to Maya, this visual language was the language of his time. This was the language he spoke. This was the language of the educated intellectual seeking something greater. So already, before we even go near alchemy or esotericism, this is normal for that particular section of society. Now, why did Maya create this book or these books as he did? He seems to have studied and to have gone very deeply into alchemical theory, alchemical history. He got his hands dirty in the lab as well. That much we do know. And in his attempt to gather all the wisdom of the ages together in the form that he had encountered it, he also realized, and he has said that this is in his writing, that he wanted to firstly protect it from profane eyes. Therefore, it had to be in a form that someone would have to really want to work with and engage with in order to make any sense of. But secondly, and most importantly, really, because there's content in there that can only really be revealed if you work with it. It can't, I can explain, if we could put an image up, I can explain to you what the individual symbols mean. We can go so far with it, but it's only once you work with it all the way that it can take you anywhere. So the riddles, and also the fact that it consists of 50 emblems, they're not in the right order. They're all backwards, upside down, wrong way around. And I say this because they don't follow the alchemical progression. It's meant to be a book on alchemy. The alchemical stages are there, but they're all like that. And so it's a riddle. It's individual riddles packed within a huge riddle, made up of a number of pieces, which are also riddles. And as he put it himself, you would have to really be, the real thing to be able to unlock it. It is unlockable, just scholars at least, and I know there are some who have gone further than I have with it. We're still working it out. I'll put it that way.
You mentioned that the emblems are out of order. How did you discover a better order, the way that they possibly should flow, or the correct order, or the recreation of what could possibly be the correct order?
So, well, he leaves a breadcrumb trail. I mean, he does have these commentaries which have the breadcrumb trail, but you've got to be able to piece it together. It's pretty obvious. Like once you know the alchemical sequence, you can see very quickly it's not in the right order, because it doesn't, nowhere do you get the sort of progression from the stage of putrefaction or base matter, and then through the gradual stages towards refinement. That sequence isn't there. And even when it is there, you see there are sets of images that feature, for example, ordinary people doing everyday work, and that's symbolic of certain alchemical stages. But mixed within them, you've got the incredibly sort of esoteric symbolism, you've got planetary symbolism, you've got all sorts of things, at which in other alchemical sequences or in other alchemical writings, there is a set sequence, and that's all been mixed up. So I'm not the first to have noticed this, nor the last, but I came to it before I knew that others had noticed the same thing. So I kind of noticed it and then went looking and saw, it's not just me. I'm not imagining this. And so first of all, which is what others tried, I went with one of the alchemical sequences. Now, the alchemical stages, in some alchemical writings, there are 4 stages. Those can be subdivided into 7. They can be subdivided into 12. None of those quite worked. None of them were quite right. It seemed that it was kind of forced. You couldn't get those numbers to work with the number 50. We've got 50 emblems. So I went back to Maya, and I went back to the beginning. And I looked at the very first verse accompanying the very first emblem, which basically tells us the way to unlock it is Pythagorean. It's in Pythagorean math, and it kind of gives a sequence to follow, which led me to the first emblem in the series, and then also gave a series of other meanings within the emblems. And elsewhere in the commentary, he does also confirm that the Pythagorean sequence of numbers is the key to the Atalanta. once you've got that, it's still not simple, because you then need to figure out, okay, I've got that much, but where do they all fit together? It doesn't really tell you which images go with which. So from there, you've got to use some of the visual clues, some of the written clues. You've got to use the commentary. You've got to use the clues he gives you, and slowly, piece by piece, you can pull it together. What I ended up with, and I don't claim that I finished the job. I know that I got to a certain stage, which was sufficient for at least my purposes. I established that it probably works as a kind of spiral, because the alchemical process works as a spiral, as in one goes up and reaches a certain level of refinement, but then you need to begin the process again, and then again, and there are these successive levels, and gradually a sort of progressive refinement that will eventually lead, if you follow it, I suppose, to whatever the ultimate end is, the Philosopher's Stone in whichever form. No, I didn't reach it, but that's more or less what Maya seems to have aimed to do through this stimulation of all the senses, until we could actually get to unlock the sequence.
Before I barrel on, and of course, we could pick up any thread and talk about it for hours and hours, which is so common on this show and so common with these topics. But I've ever paused and stopped barreling on, and just Bishop Laney, do you have anything you need to get out, or any rabbit holes you want to go down?
Yeah, actually, I do. As far as rabbit holes, it's funny that you bring that up. Maybe synchronicity again, because I was thinking about a book that I had read about the author of Alice in Wonderland, and how Alice in Wonderland had a fair amount of Rosicrucian symbolism that was buried into that text as well. It's a fascinating book. I don't remember the name. I'll try and remember it. Maybe we can share it with our viewers and listeners later on. But the idea of being surrounded by these illusions and images, and yeah, if you're an educated person, if you're in the know, so to speak, being able to pick up on those, and perhaps being a test of one's of knowledge, and perhaps even initiatory level. I think that's absolutely fascinating. But I was also wondering, Atalanta, of course, is a figure in a myth. In the U.S., we actually, I learned about it when I studied mythology, but also in the U.S., we had an album that came out in the 70s called Free to Be You and Me, which was a feminist children's album. And the story was rewritten in a feminist way and was performed by Marlo Thomas and Alan Alda. I was curious, in this book, does the myth of Atalanta, is it alluded to directly, or is it something that's hinted at? I'd like to just know what role, if any, Atalanta, the mythical person, plays in this book.
Yeah, it's front and center, the myth. It's on the frontispiece. There's an illustration of precisely of the myth of Atalanta Fugiens, and of course she's this daughter, this king's daughter, and when he tells her, he completely ignores her for the first few years of her life, and then when she comes of age, he decides he wants to know her after all, and tells her, oh, you've got to be married. And she refuses, and she says, meanwhile, she's grown up in the mountains and is totally wild and self-sufficient and won't have any of it. So she says to her father, okay, fine, I'll marry whoever can outrun me in a race. So he brings suitor after suitor, tens, hundreds of suitors, puts out a call, young men, come and beat my daughter in a race and marry her, and nobody manages, until Hippomenes manages to steal some apples, some of the golden apples of the Hesperides, and as Atlanta's racing, he throws them across her path, and that confuses her. She goes after the apple, and he manages to beat her. Which, I mean, depends which version you read or how you want to interpret it, really. But in a sense, it meant that at least he was bright enough for her. And there are various other dimensions to the myth, but that is the frontispiece. One of the many reasons that this seems to have been used for the book is that Maya wanted to illustrate how fleeting and how difficult it is to actually capture the essence of the alchemical secret, if you will. So it may illustrate the actual alchemical process itself from beginning to end. So also the sort of again, the elusive nature of it, and there are various other layers to it as well. But yeah, the frontispiece itself is worth a look because it's separated. I'm looking at it. Unfortunately, I can't share it with you, but it's separated into 3 levels, and you have 3 different levels of myth. One of which there's this vessel which suggests the alchemical vessel, and it also suggests the unification of opposites, and so on and so forth. So it's all in there.
Fascinating. I started to think about it, and I was just wondering, because with the golden apple, okay, it's, you're running the race. She was a virgin huntress dedicated to Artemis. She was a great hunter, and yet she gets distracted by shiny things, and loses the race.
So
it could
be that.
it's just one way. One way.
Well, it could also have been the Philosopher's Stone, which could suggest that that's enough to sacrifice life in the wild to go after a goal like that. I mean, there's different ways you can spin it, I guess.
Yeah. Dr. Chaitow, you touched on this a little bit before when we're talking about the multimedia aspects, and you were talking about the emblems and how the complex images that intelligent people would have to figure out. But what does imagination have to do with how the Atalanta Fugiens is supposed to work? And how did Meyer understand imagination?
Okay, so I mean, Meyer didn't use the term imagination himself. It's a term that has come up when we talk about Neoplatonist philosophy, and we talk about when we talk about a lot of things, actually. When we talk about hermetic sort of initiatory dimensions, imagination is essentially a way of knowing, and it was central to the visual kind of the emphasis on the visual that I talked about in the Renaissance period. The way of knowing, or the epistemology of that particular mode of communication, was the imagination. Now, this actually stems from, it begins with Aristotle, and then it was taken up by St. Thomas Aquinas. And it's funny enough that we find it then applied to, rather than scholastic thought, we find it applied to Neoplatonist thought. But it kind of goes like this. You have the internal intellect, because this has to do with the perception of how the soul, or how the inner knowing, the inner faculties communicate with the outside world. So whatever the inner faculties and whatever the higher faculties, perhaps in communion with a higher plane, to start with, you still need the external senses. You still need your eyes and ears. And these, of course, are what Meyer was stimulating through these various, through his creation, through the images, through the music, and so forth. So you need the external senses to communicate to the internal senses. And the external senses need some kind of representation of external reality. Okay, they can't just, what am I supposed, if I'm looking at a blank wall, what am I looking at? I'm looking at nothing. Give me a symbolic relief. I'm looking at something that then my brain basically can process. So when that relief I'm looking at, or that image I'm looking at, or that emblem contains a complex layered kind of symbolism, my external senses gather it and process it inwards. At that point, I'm still not sure what I'm looking at. I need an in between, a bridge, if you like. I need another faculty to begin processing that and making sense of that. And that faculty is the imagination. It's not the imagination in the sense of, I wonder what I'm going to paint today, or I wonder what music I'm going to compose today. It's not that part of the imagination. But it's that faculty that we use when indeed we're trying to decipher a set of signs. And so yeah, as the imagination and the memory kind of, they record the impressions of both what my eyes have seen and what my internal nous, my mind, has processed. And that is the bridge between external and internal. And basically the one can't take place without the other. So it's basically a faculty of the mind, of the intellect, which allows us to process and understand symbolism. And it's very, very, as you've seen, I'm struggling to find the precise words for it because it's so hard to pin down. It's something we all do, in fact, without thinking all the time. Now, if we take this to a metaphysical level, you see, this has nothing to do with faith. It has nothing to do with a sort of more mystical type of experience. It's a totally intellectual experience, and that's often misunderstood. But as you're studying the emblems and as you're reading the symbols in the picture, in the image, and the little wheels are turning, if you like, that's where the imagination comes into play and allows your previous knowledge to communicate with what you're already looking at and give meaning. And that's basically how it worked. I hope that came across as I meant it.
No, it definitely did, and you definitely helped me to understand the concept a lot better. So, why is this text a kind of an initiation or initiatory journey?
Because it's hard work. And because the degrees of realization that occur as you get through even partial stages, because I consider I've been studying this thing for a long time, and I left it to sit a long time, and I picked it up again this year when I finally got round to publishing it. And I know I haven't reached the core, and I don't know if anybody has. I know there are scholars who have gone further than me, but the point is that, and I think everybody who's worked with the Atalanta will agree with this, that it really forces you to shift your thinking. It makes you look at reality differently. And if initiation is anything at all, it alters the way you look at reality, or it alters the reality that you experience. Now, that's my understanding of initiation, but I think it's also the general understanding of initiation. Therefore, when you see, you look at a symbolic image and you, oh, okay, there's the myth, and I can see, oh, I recognize that, and oh, I recognize those figures, and I can put it all together rationally, and that's on a kind of literal level, and we can recognize it on an allegorical level. But once we begin working with it and actually think, oh, hang on a minute, if he's saying that, that also means that the reality I'm experiencing out here is that. Now, that shift is initiation. I think you may agree. And so level by level, as you go through it, it just keeps, it just keeps hitting you, basically. And every time you unlock something, it's like, okay, so these emblems go together. It's telling me to do this. And you've just got another piece of the puzzle for whatever the lab work is or whatever the next thing he's telling you to do is. So that's pretty much how it's put together.
Yeah. Bishop Laney, I'll take another pause to make sure that we have a breath of fresh air coming in. Do you have any rabbit holes or follow-up questions?
I believe I have the musical pieces been recorded. I want to say that I've heard that they have been, but I'm not sure. It was a long time ago
They have been. Originally, I think Adam McLean, I could have this wrong, but to the best of my memory, I think Adam McLean made a very basic version, a keyboard version, and then there was I think a chamber music group or something that took it up. Now, and I would urge listeners, anyone interested in this, to go over to the website furnaceandfugue.org, which is it's Dr. Donna Billack and colleagues have done, incredible work.
Wow.
Going much further with the Atalanta Fugiens, and they've looked a lot more closely at the music. I haven't touched the music. I'm
okay.
It's not my area. I'm all about images. I'm an artist. That's what drew me in, really. But I do know, yes, that there have been recordings made. There have been several recordings made, and there's some incredible history and background to those fugues in there as well. There's hidden meanings even in the style of music that was selected. So yeah, there's more there.
Wow.
Oh boy, this is gonna be one heck of a rabbit hole for me, because I'm fascinated. I love the style of the Rosicrucian emblems to begin with, and just the being able to work with that music, and the text is available in English.
The text is available. There's a translation. There was one publication by Adam McLean and a colleague. I don't know if it's in print. There's another by H.M.E. de Jong, and it's called, again, I think it's called the Atalanta. Yeah, Michael Myers' Atalanta Fugiens, and that's a straight translation. And that was one of my main sources, to be honest. And I think she's abridged the commentaries a little bit, but not by much. So those are the two main ones that I know of. I don't know if Dr. Bilak, whom I mentioned earlier, has also either sourced or done a new one, or if there is one available on that website. But yes. But as I say, it's you kind of need to try and work with all of it and see what comes out.
Absolutely. Adam McLean has done such amazing work for us all.
He has. I think we all owe him a huge debt, to be honest.
Yeah, he was doing this at a time when a lot of people wouldn't even touch it, and he's preserved it, and he's just put his whole life into it. So it's actually quite wonderful.
He has.
Yeah, finding his website in the 90s was a huge resource and inspiration for me, and one of the things that led me to where I am now. And I think you might have perhaps you said something like this, Dr. Chaitow, that looking at alchemical emblems as an artist was something that got you interested in the esoteric. Is that right?
That's pretty much the gist of it. I mean, there were influences indirectly around me from much earlier than I ever knew. I mean, I've kind of pieced it together later in life. How did I miss that? It's esoteric sort of, I don't know, frequencies have always been in my environment, but not obviously. And I stumbled across the Taschen book. I'm sure you must have seen that one. The Taschen book by Alexandra Rube, which is this little compact book just packed with alchemical emblems. And I stumbled across that one day. I was trying to do symbolist art before I knew that symbolist art was a thing. And I was trying to do esoteric sort of hidden meanings within symbolist art before I knew esoteric was a thing either. And so I stumbled across this book. I was like, oh, this is what I want to be doing. And then I kind of, in the 90s, kind of went digging here and there and just got this hodgepodge of information together, and then suddenly stumbled across the Masters in Western Esotericism at Exeter. And then, the rest is history, really. That helped me put everything in order and kind of get a proper foundation and put what I knew in its proper place, kind of, in a sense. And the rest is history.
Yeah, I've said it before on the show, but I had a similar. I found the Taschen book, and then I found Adam McLean's website, and then I found whatever came next. So we actually have. We have 10 or 20 minutes left, hypothetically. I know it's pretty late where you were, but I'd be remiss for our friend Stepan Sofers would be very unhappy if I didn't ask you about Meyer and the Rosicrucians, like what Rosicrucianism meant to him and why the Rosicrucians sort of inspired him, or perhaps drove him a little neurotically crazy. However you want to phrase it.
Well, the first thing I'd just like to say is that I am incredibly grateful to the folk over at pansofist.com, because I wouldn't have published this book if it weren't for their nudging. I wrote this 12 years ago. It was basically my MA thesis at Exeter, and I did nothing. I was always going to do something with it. I was always too busy doing other stuff as well. That's the story of my life. But it was through some very timely nudging that I actually got around to publishing it. So I'm very grateful, and they're lovely, lovely people, really good people, and that I mean. So, as I mentioned earlier, Maya was living in a time of incredible turmoil, incredible social, political. I mean, people were killing each other all across Europe for religious reasons. It was a horrible time. And in a way, so the beauty of the Renaissance had given way to the Reformation and then religious warfare, and this just went on for a good century or so. And he's born into a place where he's just trying to make sense of all of this and trying to find a way to kind of find, a kind of order in the world. So it's not surprising in a way. He's one of the main figures who actually gave structure to a lot of the alchemical material he came across, and that was based on Pythagoras, who again sort of saw number and order as the basis for the universe. And I think it's a very real kind of quest to bring order to chaos, which isn't really surprising given the times. And if you imagine you look at the chaos of our times, it can't have felt that different. That's how I sense it. Yeah. And so it's within all of that, you suddenly get the Rosicrucian manifestos appearing seemingly out of nowhere, proclaiming this new age of bliss and harmony and grace that is imminently going to be unleashed through the teachings of these sages who have rediscovered the teachings of Christian Rosenkreuz. And Maya, of course, as far as we know, as far as the evidence, the historical evidence goes, and I speak as a historian in this case, there was no Rosicrucian Brotherhood. There was a very small group of individuals, possibly only a couple of individuals, behind these manifestos. Yet the response it provoked and the passion that they provoked was overwhelming. And Maya was one of the greatest apologists for the Rosicrucian idea, thinking that, oh my goodness, here is the answer. Here's what it's going to be. Where do I sign up? Where do I join? And so we have these incredibly poignant letters open letters that Maya published, hoping they would reach this Rosicrucian Brotherhood, sort of desperately trying to get in touch with them. And a little later in his life, these really almost heartbroken letters, sort of saying, well, I've tried and I've tried and I've gone this far and I've managed to. He sort of had this system of 18 steps in his mind, of 18 steps of initiation. It's like, I've reached the 17th, but there is no way I can go further. I will always be in the dark without a mentor unless I have guidance. And he never found that guidance, it seems. And that's why that's why he created his own system, to at least leave a breadcrumb trail for those who would follow. So, and the irony being, of course, that his work was deeply, deeply inspirational to the early Rosicrucian Brotherhoods that were formed in the aftermath of the manifestos, but of course he never got to see them. So it's a very interesting sequence of events, which is counterintuitive in a way, but yeah.
And finally, the most important question of all: where can people buy your book?
So not on Amazon, I'm afraid. Yeah. No, this is, I've released this under my gallery label because we do publish art books, and because I have about 6 other books in the on the way at the moment with major publishers, some of them. So this one I just wanted to be available direct from me to those who are interested. So you can find it through my website, sashachaitow.co.uk. And then it's like you can find it on the front page, but it's also /Atalanta Unveiled. And it's also available through Lulu if you just put my name in there, or put the title Atalanta Fugiens, Atalanta Unveiled, in there. So it's only available directly from me, I'm afraid, for now.
Well, I'll also make sure to put the link in the show notes. Well, I think that's it for tonight. That was amazing, and I can't wait to get my hands on a copy of this book.
Same here.
And
Same here.
yeah, and if you folks out there, watchers, listeners, buy the book. If you achieve the Philosopher's Stone, please let us know. And Dr. Chaitow, thanks again so much for joining us in the middle of the night, your time.
Yes.
When the next book comes out, hopefully we'll have you back on to talk about that. And it's just been an awesome show. So many thanks.
Thank you very much for having me, and keep up the good work.
Thanks. Okay, folks, this is Deacon Jonathan signing off. We love you. Good night.
Good night.